Hey guys, welcome back. So this is the third video related to my CCIE Enterprise Lab using EvenG. The last video, if I remember correctly, we completed the portion about the remote site. I think we completed this portion about, let me put it this, about the branch 2 CH2. This portion was completed, and what I said is that in this video we're gonna focus on the data center devices. So just a high level view of the current topology. So basically, let me see if I can use this color here. Of these. Okay, let's recap what we have here. Okay, so this portion, these two connections are my service connections, and these will be my transport connections. Right? Let me put it. These are the transport, these two links, right? So basically, this is the service. We're gonna use BRF10, and this is the transport. In this case, I didn't configure any IGP protocol. I'm just basically using a static routes pointing to my DCR2 and my DCR1, right? It's a simple static route. And these routers know about the controllers, right? So here I'm using OSPF version 3. And I was trying to establish OSPF version 3 between the switch 2 and the FTD firewall, but I couldn't do it. I'm not an expert on firewalls. I tried it, but yeah, I couldn't configure that portion. So what I did was just configure static routes pointing to this FTD for the controllers and also a default route, right? And then the redistribution into OSPF or the default information originate, right? So everybody knows about that default route, about the controllers, and for the portion here about the firewall rules, I just allow, we can take a look at that. I don't really remember the full configuration. So what I would like to show you the configuration that I have, how these devices establish control connections to the controllers, and that's what I would like to show you in this video. So let's start with the first. Let's check switch 2, right? Switch 3 and switch 4, there is nothing really complex here. It's a port channel spanning tree, nothing really complicated here. So let me focus on the OSPF. Let's focus on switch 2. As I mentioned, I'm using OSPF version 3, right? So I have my connections to the switches, which are switch 3, switch 4, and also my connections to the routers, right? The uplinks. So I have these 4 channels, these OSPF version 3. There is nothing really complex about the configuration, right? So I redistributed the static routes because, as I mentioned, I couldn't establish OSPF with the FTD firewall. So what I did was just create static routes pointing to the firewall, right? And then the redistribution of these static routes. As you can see here, this is the segment related to the controllers. The default route that also points to the firewall. And I'm not using these ones at this time. And that's what I have related to this. Now, something that section that I want to also point out is between my switches or my cores, instead of creating OSPF version 3, I would like to have better control over the networks that I send to my SD1 deployment. So I establish eBGP between these cEdges and the cores. I think you will have better control over the networks that you share across your, I would say, legacy environment and SD-WAN. So that's something that I also configured. So let's check the show run section BGP. So you can see that I have eBGP sessions also, and I redistributed OSPF version 3 into my BGP, right? So then I can send those routes through OMP. Show up BGP summary, right? So I have my BGP connections, right? Let's check the router. And I don't really need to show you the rest of the configuration. These are layer 3. The eBGP is the same switch 1, switch 2. I didn't establish iBGP between switch 1 and switch 2. Probably something that I should do. I don't know. I need to double check. But let's go to router 2 and let's see what I have here. So show IP, show OSPF version 3, right? We have the neighborship of show section BGP. I have my BGP. In this case, I'm going to establish BGP with my PE, the MPLS connection, right? So I have BGP and also OSPF. Now to reach, let's see the configuration that I have. These are layer 3, and I don't think I have any static route section IP route. Yeah, I don't have any static route. I just redistributed connected. So that's BGP. Let's check OSPF. Right, I redistribute the connected. So what is going to happen? The routers will redistribute these connections. The FTD should know how to reach these specific segments, and also the routers know about the controllers, right? So that's the reason why the cEdges can establish the control connection, right? So show SD-WAN. No, it's not this. Let's go with this. Let's try this. Show SD-WAN control connections, right? So I have my control connections. I have two TLOCs, right? Private 1, private 2. Let me show you the configuration, in fact, that I have here, right? This is something I added also to my remote branches, because you will see, or I will explain later, why it should be a good idea to point to the host name instead of the IP. So I have default routes pointing to my routers, my DC routers, and this is a BRF configuration. So I can establish the eBGP using the loopbacks and not the physical interfaces. These are the loopback address from my switch 1 and switch 2, which are my core. So IP interface reset and find it. So we have 12, for example, right? And let's see, 12, right? So with that, that's the reason why I'm able to establish eBGP with the loopbacks. So show SD-WAN running. Let's see what else I have. The interfaces, private 1, private 2. This is the eBGP, right? To switch 1, switch 2. I will also show you the templates that I have. In this case, I use configuration groups. I think it's better to use configuration groups than the regular templates. At least that's what I've been seeing during this configuration. That is, I think it's a little bit easier to configure, updates, and all those things. This is the configuration that I have. When you work with the configuration group, you try to create common name groups, right? So you can reuse those groups in different templates. So for example, I have the common one, and the common one is something that I will use in all my templates. That is a small branch, the medium branch, right? So this is the same configuration. Here I have the DC one. If you can see here, private one, private two. You need to enable the tunnels. Yeah, nothing that, if you know a little bit about SD1, is nothing complex here. And this is the BGP, right? Or the template that I'm using for eBGP between the cEdge and my switches, the eBGP. So that's what I have. And something that I would like to point out is this configuration here. So before I was using the IP address, which is not really recommended. Everybody uses a whole full quality domain name, right? Especially for scenarios like this, like the branch, right? If you use a specific IP and you have the private and you have the internet, right? So you, based on what I know, I don't know, I haven't tried to put more than one IP address, but you can just use one BBON IP address, right? So if I use the private, then it will use the private only. If I use the public, it will use the public only. And what I need is both of these connections have to establish control connections with the controllers. I should be able to use any of these circuits, whether public or private. So that's the reason why I added this configuration here. So if you check this, show SD1 control connections, right? I have BBON, I have two connections. BSmart, in this case, I have only one connection to the BSmart and one connection to the BManage. I should have two connections to the BSmart. I need to double check that. But if we check the show SD1 local properties, you will see that I have two IP addresses trying to connect to the BBON. And in fact, this is up. We don't have any. I think I should have at least one here. Yeah, I need to double check this because it's using the private, but let's do something. Let me just, oh, I think this is down. Yeah, oh, okay, that's the reason this router is down. Let's see if that fixes the problem. Yeah, because I should be able to see two connections to the BSmart, only two connections to the BBON, and only one connection to the BManage. That's what we should see here. But let's just wait for this. Okay, so you can see that now we have two connections to the BSmart and two connections to the BBON. Yeah, the problem was that a specific device, the ISP, was down, and that's the reason why this router couldn't establish a control connection to the BBON, the BSmart. And now we can see 1-0, which is what I was expecting. It was 0-0. Yeah, so that's what I have so far. Let's see, the MPLS is also not complex configuration. Of course, I have my BRF, my import, export. Let's see. So I have the CCIE, right? Do you have the RD, and then the export, the import, and also the configuration between the routers. I'm using also, this is, I'm trying to simulate MPLS, right? So we have the LDPs and the neighbors. So let me see, show LDP, MPLS, LDP, neighbors, right? I have two neighbors. This is the PE. So I have P11 and P12, right? And the BGP probably is another thing that you need to double check, right? Because we establish connections to CR1, DCR2, right? Because we need to learn those controllers, and this MPLS will send the information to the branch one. So this branch can establish control connections to those controllers, right? And also I have, this should be IBGP between my PE11 and PE12 section. Yep. you have this, and I have multiple connections to my branches, right? This .2, this 10.255.156.2 is the connection to branch 1. So that's the reason why this device knows about those networks. So that's what I have. If someone has any questions, please just let me know so I can go into more details if there is a specific question. For now, this is like a high level overview of what I have. And yep, thanks for watching.